Now, I'm going to be covering two particular incidents that have happened over the past few days, one in Sheffield, one in Sweden, and then looking more broadly at some other incidents that have happened that we can be more definitive about. But with these ones in Sheffield and Sweden, the police have not released the characteristics or the names of the people who did it, so it would be unwise of us to speculate about it. So I will simply talk about how Britain and Sweden in particular, formerly one of the most homogenous and peaceful countries, not just in the Western world, but in the entire world, did not used to be like this. So the big news that came out over the past few days is that on Monday, a school in Sheffield, All Saints Catholic High School, suffered a stabbing. In an update to it, the Assistant Chief Constable Lindsay Butterfield said that the boy died a short time after the stabbing happened. This child was called, let me just get his name here. The child was called Harvey Wilgoose, and he was 15 years old. Now, the police are saying avoid speculation and the sharing of online content. The educational secretary says that this is devastating, and the news about the news, while Labour's Sheffield Heeley MP Louise Hay said that serious questions will need to be answered. Now, there are rumours spreading about this already. Again, I will not be surprised if those rumours turn out to be true, but we can't talk about the rumours or speculate on them right now. All I will say is that Sheffield has changed significantly over the past few decades and has become about 1/5 diverse, which has irreparably changed how the city looks and how the city feels. I went there a few years ago. It is shocking how non-British that it feels. And these kinds of incidents were not necessarily outside of the realm of possibility before we were diversified, but have become, sadly, much, much more common since diversity has made us so much stronger.
How many stabbings at Catholic schools happened before said unwanted intrusion? Again, can't speculate, but it is very unusual that a Catholic school sees this kind of violence without something changing about the composition of the student body.
Yes, and it has been confirmed that one of the boy who is the suspect has been arrested on suspicion of murder, was also aged 15 years old. The region's mayor, Oliver Coppard, said that one instance of knife crime is too many, while local MP said that serious questions will have to be answered. Again, serious questions. Oh, this is terrible. What a tragedy. Are we going to actually do anything practical to stop this? Well, maybe. Yes. What's that going to be? So in this article, they talk about what the response to this is going to be. Well, first of all, there's some extra context for this. South Yorkshire Police have confirmed, well, no, the school has confirmed that it had gone into lockdown last week because there were threats of violence between pupils, and parents were informed of this on the 29th of January. So we can assume that it was the same people, this Harvey child who's sadly been murdered, and the child who killed him. The police said they can't comment on it because the police can't comment on anything, because the police can't give any information. They're more than happy to let rumours spread because they are. But
I think it's because, and this is what they will say, is because the perpetrator is also a minor. But in lieu of information being provided to the public, can they be shocked when people speculate, especially on social media, and when the bizarre rules of this country are that we sequester the entire public to keep the jury safe rather than sequester the jury to keep the public safe? Very strange.
Always lots of questions that tend to pop up after incidents like this, particularly following incidents like Axel Ruda Cabana, where lack of information given to the public after the killings that he committed led to rampant speculation, that led to speculation that went in sort of the wrong direction and led to a lot of panic in people and led to a lot of protests. But then again, the government just used them to hoover up a load of people off of the street who weren't actually doing anything wrong, so they could look as though they were tackling hate crimes.
What's interesting in that case as well, and this isn't speculation because it's been confirmed by the school, is that in Axel Rudapakana's instance, he brought a knife into school 10 times. He was excluded from school. He came back with a hockey stick. He was prowling the halls with a
He'd
hit
been
list.
referred to prevent a number of times.
But specifically, the school knew about his violence multiple times, and the police failed to intervene. Now, if the school is being rocked by such problems as they're going to have to go on lockdown because of threats of violence from pupils, and then a week later, poor Harvey gets murdered, why were there no stepping up of security in that time?
And even if this does turn out to have been a student of white British background who's committed the murder as well, I think also it's important to always highlight the cultural effect that happens when we have these diversified cities and these diversified neighborhoods. And it's something I actually commented on in a daily video the other day, which was a bit more light in tone, where I was asking why it is exactly that so many gingers seem to turn to radical Islam in particular. And there has been some, I think Breitbart and Milo Yiannopoulos, of all people, actually did a quick survey looking at it and found that about 76% of white converts who went to radical Islam, not non-radical Islam, radical Islam, were all ginger.
Like Barry from Four Lions.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just talking about how a lot of these kids are working class or from the underclasses. A lot of them are from backgrounds that a few years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, you'd call them chavs. So for whatever reason, they seem to be particularly susceptible to taking on these foreign cultures. Like the chavs were essentially white kids taking on black culture, right? This culture that glorifies violence, that glorifies misogyny, that glorifies things that you wouldn't describe as being Western values. And I do think that has knock-on effects that could lead to situations like this, but that might be straying too far into speculation. But it's always important to point out the cultural effect that it has on our own children, outside of just the effects done by, foreigners themselves. But again, what's the actual practical response going to be? Well, the government was already looking to make it more difficult to buy knives. Idris Elba put forward the genius idea that maybe just don't make them so pointy at the end, because you can't slash someone to death, right? Says Idris Elba, who played an African warlord in one film.
Beast of No Name.
Yeah, which used machetes. So you'd think he'd know there was some faulty logic there.
The Boy Scouts, do they have blunt knives?
I don't know.
Sikhs, do they have blunt knives?
I don't know.
It's weird that they've got these very sharp, pointy knives on them at all times, but you don't have mass Sikh or Boy Scout stabbings. Is there something cultural going on here?
I don't know, but they're definitely using this to carry on the manufacturing of consent, because they point out here the stabbing has sparked a wider conversation about knife crime in schools. Which schools, done by which students? Oh, wait, you can't have any of that information, probably because the government doesn't collect that information, because they know exactly what that information would say.
They act like the knife just appears before Macbeth and floats into Duncan.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Former Children's Commissioner for England warned knife crime involving teenagers is a national crisis that needs a national response. Baroness Anne Longfield said, "I wouldn't like to see teachers in stab vests or body cams or metal scanners. We can't turn our schools into fortresses or heighten feelings of school being a dangerous place. Knife crime incidences inside schools do remain extremely rare, but we're still going to have to, stop you from buying them in the first place. Only online, though, because it helps us to implement digital ID. Presumably, you can still go into a corner shop and get some."
Amazon already had digital ID. Axel Rudakana bought the knife, so whose ID did he use to verify it?
Don't ask questions. What did Keir Starmer have to say on this? Basically nothing, just doing a rote, my thoughts are with the family right now.
He doesn't have any thoughts.
Yeah, he doesn't have any feelings. What else do we have that diversity has given to us? Let's just a reminder that Axel Rudakabana is going to prison still, but there was some kind of judge correcting a sentencing error that was purely technical. He refused to attend court for this because, it's not like he's complied very much with anything else that we've been going through. And as well, as we mentioned in the last segment, the current Rochdale sex abuse trials are ongoing. Connor already named the suspects that have been charged, that are going through the trial right now, but I'll go through their names again anyway. Mohammed Zahid, Kasir Bashir, Mushtaq Ahmed, Rahiz Khan, Mohammed Shahzad, Nasir Hussein, Naheem Akram, and Arfan Khan. They're all denying the charges, but they are alleged to have repeatedly raped two underage girls over a course of 5 years.
What's important about this as well is no matter what happens in this trial, if they all get convicted, which usually does happen in these trials because they're not often brought to trial unless there's a solid case against the rapists, no matter how long the sentences they get, they will seamlessly slot back into their community because often family members and friends not only participate in the rape gangs, but they help cover up. Yeah. For example, the harrowing trial that happened last year that Charlie Peters of GB News covered, when the sentence was read out of a man for raping children repeatedly, his daughter cried out, "I love you, Dad." And then his family tried
She must have been so proud of him.
Well, his family tried to start a fight with a victim outside the courthouse, causing court security to intervene because they said, "We need to slap the bitch." So,
well, it was obviously the victim's fault for going to the police in the first place. I would assume is the logic,
and that is the attitude of these communities. So again, if these little ethnic petri dishes of anti-white hatred and demonizing these children for being unbelievers, kafir, exist, these little pockets of sedition, you're going to reliably produce criminals who inflict their violent racial and religious hatred onto innocent members of our population. So yet again, diversity has deleterious consequences.
Well, no, I've been told a number of times, over and over and over again, that it makes us stronger. Diversity keeps getting stronger because the demographics keep changing and the populations of foreigners keep increasing. So therefore, we must be getting stronger, right?
Keen reader of Fraser Nelson's column.
Yeah, we're very, very strong. We get so many economic benefits like this one that was recently published by the Centre for Migration Control that dependent migrants let in by the last government will cost us £35 billion by 2028. So, income tax being paid by 4 million Brits, their income tax, it will be covering that. Going to nothing else but covering the cost of dependent migrants. Now, if that's not value for money, then I don't know what is.
You know that for all the healthcare visas that we've let in, for example, Zimbabweans that we let in on health and social care visas, they were 10 to 1 outnumbered by their dependents. Why are we just battery farming the dependents of foreign nationals?
Yeah, why is London turning into a slum town for the world's homeless?
About 38% of people sleeping rough now are foreign nationals. Why are we importing homeless people?
And 1 in 12 of the population of London is illegal in the first place.
And that's a low estimate for 2017.
That is a low estimate, yep. Before the Boris wave, thank you very much for that, Tories. Moving on to Sweden now. So tragically, this has been confirmed. At first, it was news that a shooting had happened at a school in Sweden. The initial news that I'd seen was that 5 people had been injured, but now it's 11 have been killed, confirmed to have been killed at this education centre in Sweden that gives offers adult education classes and Swedish language classes for immigrants. Now, again, we shouldn't speculate on the identity of the perpetrator. The most that I've been able to find regarding this is that the Daily Mail have published an article talking about the gunman who carried out Sweden's worst ever mass shooting was an unemployed loner. Interesting, again, that we hear echoes of the kind of language that Keir Starmer used when he was talking about Axel Rudakabana. Again, putting the reasons for this not on ethnic conflict, religious fervor, anything like that, but on the fact that he was a loner and an incel. It's the incel menace. It's Andrew Tate doing this to us.
How many lone wolves till you have a pack?
Good question. But there was an unemployed loner who doesn't like people and only enjoyed spending time with his parents' dog. The only information that they say here is that authorities are yet to reveal the shooter's identity, but relatives speaking to Swedish press painted a picture of a troubled recluse who had lost contact with his family and friends. The shooter also legally changed his name 8 years ago, a move that took family members by surprise. Beyond that, we don't really have any information. So he could be ethnically Swedish, he could be somebody who isn't ethnically Swedish. Either way, this is not the sort of thing that happened in Sweden even 20 or 30 years ago. These kinds of mass shootings are something that have become worryingly common in Sweden, to the point that now we have the worst one ever. And it's got to the point where it has its own Wikipedia entry, gun violence in Sweden. Why should there be any sort of entries like that on Sweden? But I'll carry on with some of the information here. The school was called Campus Risbergska, and it offers primary and secondary educational classes for adults 20 and older. Swedish language classes for immigrants, vocational training, and programs for people with intellectual disabilities. It's on the outskirts of Örebro, which is about 200 kilometers, 125 miles west of Stockholm. Authorities were working to identify the deceased, and police said that the toll could rise because people are still injured. They've gone to hospital. Who knows if they're going to make it? I mean, hope they do. Roberto Ede Forrest, head of the local police, told reporters the suspected gunman was among the dead. There were no warnings beforehand, and the police believe the perpetrator acted alone. While gun violence at schools is very rare in Sweden, people were wounded or killed with other weapons such as knives or axes in several incidents in recent years. And what have the Swedish police done? What have they done? Have they said, we're going to solve this problem, we're going to speak to the authorities and the relevant people in the government to try and get this problem solved practically? No, they've done exactly what the British police have said. Don't talk about it. Just don't talk about ideology, don't talk about religion, don't talk about anything, which is only inviting speculation. And part of me believes that the reason that they do this sort of thing is to invite speculation so that then they can get you when you do speculate on it online.
They have a pretext to censor online discourse because online discourse is synonymous with misinformation, because in lieu of the facts being provided, people go and search those out and sometimes get them wrong.
Yeah, shockingly enough, when the deadliest mass shooting in Sweden's history happens, people want answers. That's what people look for, especially when, it points out in this article, Sweden has been struggling with a wave of shootings and bombings caused by endemic crime problems, organized crime that has seen the country of 10 million people record by far the highest per capita rate of gun violence in the EU in recent years.
There might be endemic crime problems here.
So who's involved in this organized crime? Well, I mean, I looked at Statista. They don't have the data for me. I asked The Guardian, and what they told me is that socioeconomic factors are what constitute the risks of ending up in crime. Okay, I thought, well, you know, maybe I keep hearing social scientists telling me this, just socioeconomic factors. I went to the Institute of Race Relations, a British organisation, for some reason commenting on Sweden's gang problem, that wanted to talk about the fact that it's a racial security state. They just wanted to complain about how they were criminalising racialized working class neighborhoods. And let me see if I can find the particular quote here, where they wanted to link Islamic terrorism with immigration.
So hang on.
Because Sweden without immigration would just be a hotbed of Islamic terrorism anyway, assumedly.
Yeah, because Mecca was in Stockholm. It's curious to me how they always discuss these economic factors as kind of outside forces preying upon a given population.
Like gin brain.
Yeah, because if you think of an economy, it's just the cumulative activity of a people in a place over time. And
which is also what you could describe culture as.
Exactly, and a culture is just the accumulated customs, traditions, and stories that a people tell themselves about themselves, which is why there's always a prefix of a nation before a particular culture or values, like British culture and British values cannot be separated from British people because they own that culture. So if these, racialized working class communities,
yes,
if they are being preyed upon by economic factors,
and the police, apparently the expansion of police presence in these neighborhoods is what causes them to commit crime, because again, gin brain.
So if we look at the, let's say, home nations rather than the host nations of these racialized working class communities that are not indigenous to Sweden, do we see similar economic deprivation there? Because if so, you might say that it's not economic factors causing them to commit crime, it's their penchant for crime causing said economic deprivation. But then again, there's not a victim narrative to make money there, is there?
You might be able to say that about some of the home countries, but those home countries now, since they sent all of their criminals here, are probably much nicer.
I don't think Mogadishu's that nice this time of year.
Maybe not Mogadishu, but I've seen a number of countries saying, oh, thank God you took our scum off our hands.
The Saudis were warning that, actually, quite a while ago. They were like, yeah, we banned the Muslim Brotherhood because we know what they're like, and you've just let them in. You're idiots. Like,
I mean, if they're right, they're right. But I found this other article, which is one of the closest that I could get from just a normal Google search, that gives a bit more of a better rundown on it. Ironically enough, written by a man born in Sweden called Tam Hussein, who I assume is not particularly ethnically Swedish himself, but who actually has a much more sensible and matter-of-fact take on this. where he's talking about a section of Malmo, a city in Sweden, that he grew up in called Rinkeby, and saying how it's changed now from when it was when he was a child in the 1980s growing up there. He said he left the country for a long time, came back so that he could write this article, how Sweden became a transnational crime hub. And he was hoping that, Rinkeby would be the same that it always was. A nice place to live that was a bit of an ethnic enclave of foreigners, yes, but people got along, lived their lives, were productive and pleasant neighbours to one another. Nope. In Rinkeby, rival gangs called the Shotas and Dödspatrullen, mostly made up of Somali Swedes and inspired by London's drill music scene, so great that we're finally getting some of our soft power out there. That's some of that cultural export.
Made in Britain.
Yeah, we're second hardest soft power in the world. We're not only causing havoc locally, but their reach crossed over to Copenhagen as well. In 2020, their gang rivalry resulted in double murders in Denmark. One of the leaders of the Shotas, Yasin Abdullahi, an award-winning rapper...
Drill is just like cultural Viagra, basically.
Yes.
Right.
But this guy, Abdullahi, had become both a symbol of the problem and a source of local pride. He had been involved in the killing of Sweden's leading rap star Einar in 2021. Einar was a white guy. He was a ethnic Swede. And I've got to say, Swedish people should not rap. You should play melodic death metal and Europop.
Unless you're PewDiePie dunking on T-Series.
Unless you're PewDiePie dunking on T-Series, yes. I will make an exception there. He also said that he discovered that a few phone calls could get you relics from, for some reason, the Bosnian Civil War. Serbian gangs, who are just operating in Malmo in Sweden for some reason, could sell you automatic guns with a few hand grenades thrown in as a bonus, because, of course, Malmo in particular is the hand grenade central capital of Europe. Rawa Majid, the son of Kurdish-Iranian refugees, perfectly epitomized the interplay between migration, transnational crime, and terrorism. He was a Swedish tabloid's dream. Dubbed the Kurdish Fox, he trafficked vast quantities of narcotics into Sweden while seemingly remaining untouchable in Istanbul, Turkey. His gang orchestrated chilling acts of violence using children as young as 13. He even dabbled in terrorism. Swedish and Israeli authorities claim that his gang planted grenades at the Israeli embassy in Stockholm on behalf of Iran. So that's some choice information I picked out of this. So, wonder why the Institute of Race Relations wants to use such euphemisms as racialized working class neighborhoods, when really what they're just trying to avoid saying is foreign criminals.
Islamic gangs.
Islamic gangs and foreign criminals. Which is interesting because I wanted to look more into this, but Sweden doesn't collect the ethnic or racial data on its prison population, as far as I could tell, not the religious information either. Instead, it just collects the country of birth, which is very convenient, and it's because of an official policy to prevent bias. I wonder why that is. And on a related note, hopping back to England, jolly old Britain, for a moment, the Met Police are scrapping the gang's violence matrix after more than a decade over concerns about the scheme's disproportionality.
Yeah, thank you, Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Because again, solving crime is as simple as ignoring that it's going on in the first place.
Blame the far right.
Yeah, blame the far right for noticing. Here's one story that sadly I can be a little bit more concrete on as being directly resulted from diversity, which is going over to the Netherlands. I saw this because Josh had posted about it on Twitter. An 11-year-old Dutch girl was stabbed to death by a man from Syria in broad daylight.
Same keeps happening in Germany.
Yep. And what else? I just saw this pop up. I don't know who these guys are, so I'm not one way or the other, but this was interesting information as well. 14-year-old girl recently beaten in Germany until she suffered brain hemorrhage. 15-year-old girl assaulted and robbed in Vienna, and a 16-year-old girl in Sweden was stripped and forced to eat her own hair, all within the same week. So, yeah, diversity keeps making us stronger and stronger and stronger.
Who's us in this sentence?
Not you and me. And not your children.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.